This is Dave with NAPCO Tech Support. In this video, we will discuss how to troubleshoot a communications failure between an alarm panel and a Starlink radio. Feel free to pause the video at any time if it makes it easier to follow along. At this point, I would like to note that a communications failure and a line failure are two completely different issues with different troubleshooting steps. This video will be focusing only on troubleshooting communication failures. Now, before we can discuss troubleshooting, we must first understand the problem. When you have a comm fail on your alarm panel, it means the alarm panel failed to have a successful communication with its program destination. Traditionally, the program destination would be your central station. Your alarm panel would be point A and your central station would be point B. When you use a Starlink radio, the panel remains as point A. The radio then becomes point B. The NAPCO NOC becomes point C, and the central station becomes point D. When you have a communication failure on your alarm panel, that means there is a failure between point A and point B, not C or D. So when you troubleshoot, you do so between point A and point B. So what exactly is supposed to happen between point A and point B? I'm going to play for you what a successful alarm transmission sounds like, and then I will break it down piece by piece. Now, let's break this down. The first part is the panel dialing 10 digits for the phone number. After that, you hear the radio respond with the contact ID handshake. After the handshake, the panel responds with the data dump. Finally, the radio responds with the signal that lets the panel know it has received the data, and that's called a kiss-off. If any part of this transmission fails, that is considered a communication failure. Before I explain troubleshooting, I want to go into more detail about the transmissions. The Starlink radios by default work with contact ID and standard 4x2. We have versions that work with other formats as well, but we are going to stick with the basics for this video. Out of the box, a Starlink radio will work with contact ID and standard 4x2 without having to make any changes to the radio. When you pick up and dial out to the radio will rotate through 3 handshakes. When your panel hears the handshake it is waiting for, it will respond. The 3 handshakes by default and in order are contact ID, 2300 Hz 4x2, and 1400 Hz 4x2. This is what a successful 2300 Hz 4x2 transmission sounds like. You can hear the contact ID handshake first. The radio then moves to the 2300 Hz handshake, and the panel then responds with a 4x2 pulse data dump with a kiss-off from the radio at the very end. This is what a successful 1400 Hz 4x2 transmission sounds like. You can hear the contact ID handshake first, then the 2300 Hz handshake, and finally, the radio then moves to the 1400 Hz handshake, and the panel then responds with a 4x2 pulse data dump with a kiss-off from the radio at the very end. To be clear, This communication you are hearing is between the panel and your radio. It is not the central station receiver you are hearing. Remember, the radio is a dial capture device. It's not the same as a direct line to your central station. The radio captures the signal first, then passes it on to our NAPCO NOC, and then it goes to your central station. Now that you have heard what successful transmissions sound like, let's discuss troubleshooting. Let's say you get to the job site and you have a communication failure showing on your alarm panel. The first thing you should do is grab a lineman's handset, also known as a butt set. And this will be your main tool for troubleshooting this problem. If you don't have a butt set, you are just going to be guessing and not actually troubleshooting. If you don't own a butt set, do yourself a favor and get one. An okay butt set with a built-in speaker can run you about $200, but it's well worth it and it'll pay itself off quickly. You can troubleshoot with a butt set by tapping the line between the alarm panel and the radio. Now, depending on which model Starlink you have, there will be two possible types of telco connections. The first one just has screw terminals for your panel's tip and ring. All you need to do to tap into it is clip your butt set onto the exposed part of your connection, either back at your panel or on the radio itself. In this example here, I have it connected to the tip and ring on the alarm panel itself. The second type of connection you will run into is the RJ45 jacks. In this case, you don't have exposed wires to tap into, so you would build yourself a wire tap, like the one I have here. These are easy to make, and once you make one, you will always have it. I'll show you how I made this tap at the end of the video. After you tap the line, you will put your butt set on talk and listen to verify there is a dial tone. The dial tone will go out and then come back on. This is a cycle that will keep repeating, and it's the normal state for the radio. Next, you will press a single key 10 times quickly. I usually do 5s or 9s. Then, you want to verify your radio generates the 3 handshakes. If it does, this tells you the radio is capable of listening to the dial out of the alarm panel, and it is also capable of responding with a handshake. Now, put the butt set on monitor and trigger the transmission on your alarm panel. I usually recommend triggering a trouble on a fire alarm panel so you aren't clearing out the building. This is most easily done by disconnecting the NAC circuit on the panel, which has the effect of both transmitting a trouble within 30 seconds and it prevents you from making a lot of noise in the building. Finally, listen for the transmission from the alarm panel. Now that we have covered the troubleshooting steps, let's discuss what could go wrong and what the solutions are. If you dial to your radio, or when your panel dials to your radio, you don't hear a handshake, first, check your voltage to your radio. If it's a Berg radio, make sure it's getting between 12 and 15 VDC regulated power. If it's a fire radio, make sure it's getting between 12 and 26 VDC regulated power. No AC voltage, no resettable power, no full wave rectified, and no unregulated DC. If the power is correct and you're still not getting a handshake, there may be something wrong with your radio. However, if you heard a handshake when you dialed with your butt set, but not when your panel dialed, it could be caused by a rotary dialing setting. For example, this is what rotary sounds like. If you hear rotary, that will not work with the Starlink radio. You can use touch tone dialing only. Also, if you hear touch tone from your panel and the radio doesn't respond with a handshake, but it does respond to your butt set, this could mean that the panel has a rotary backup setting. So verify your panel's programming. Remember, the radio is expecting touch tone only, no rotary or rotary backup, and at least 10 digits in the phone number. If you hear your panel dial out, and you hear all 3 of the handshakes, but your panel does not respond with a dump, your panel is most likely programmed with an incompatible format. This is what I have found to be the most common problem. Often people will guess or just go on what someone else has told them about the panel central station format. Verify the central station format in your panel's programming. Check and make sure your panel is set to contact ID or standard 4x2, either 2300 Hz or 1400 Hz. After you have verified the programming in your panel and the problem still persists, try changing the order of the handshakes under the Advanced tab on the knock. Some older panels may want their handshake to be first, second, or third. If it still doesn't work, then you are having an issue with your panel. If you hear the panel dial out, you hear the handshake, you hear the dump, but you don't hear a kiss off, the first thing to do is check and make sure your panel is dialing at least 10 digits for the phone number. If your panel is not dialing at least 10 digits, you can run into this issue, especially with fire panels. Also, if you have the radio with the 2 phone jacks on it, like this one here, try removing the J7 jumper and try again. For more information on what the J7 jumper does, refer to the manual for your radio. While we're at it, here's a bonus tip. High voltage can cause the radios to behave strangely. If you have high power or dirty power that you think may be causing issues on your radio, you can test the radio by wiring a 12 VDC 7 amp hour battery directly to the radio on screw terminals 1 and 2. Make sure you disconnect the power you originally had connected to the radio before you make the battery connection though. I promised I'd show you how to build that simple tap that I used earlier in the video, so here it is. First, you want to get an RJ45 connection block with 2 ports. Next, you get 2 lengths of wire you can work with and strip back a section in the middle on each. Now, grab yourself a couple of self-tapping screws and screw them into the lid. You don't want them to go all the way down, you want enough to stick out so your butt set can clamp onto them. Now, connect the wires for your blue and blue-white terminals on one jack, then wrap the exposed wire around each screw. Next, connect the blue and blue-white terminals to the other side. Finally, you can add some electrical tape or silicone to the screws to prevent them from shorting out on something. It will also help keep the wires in place. Now you have yourself a quick and easy RJ45 tap that you can use for troubleshooting. You can throw this in your tool bag or your truck and break it out whenever you need it. As always, if you need documentation on any current NAPCO devices, or if you're looking for more videos like this, head on over to our tech library at tech.napcosecurity.com.